Hello everyone, welcome to Retro Dad and Modern Lad, the YouTube channel and soon to be website. Today's video is going to be showcasing 5 of the Sega Saturn's most expensive games and 5 cheaper alternatives. The 5 expensive games will cost around £1,000, which is really expensive, while the cheaper alternatives will cost just over £100. Some of the Sega Saturn's rarest games have skyrocketed in price over the years, but some of its best games are still very reasonably priced. A lot of people are put off starting to collect for the Sega Saturn because they think it's really expensive, and while it can be, I'd say it's only about 10% that's really expensive. The other 90% is reasonably priced or very cheap, and I'd say that some of the best games on the Sega Saturn fall into that category. So let's take a look at some of the games for today. GVAC is an on-the-rails shooter that has some really good 3D graphics for the Sega Saturn game. It was made by Soft Office and released as a Japan exclusive in 1997. The game reminds me a bit of Space Harrier, but beware, this game isn't for the faint-hearted. It's one of the hardest games on the Sega Saturn. This is also an expensive game, costing in the region of £150. It is a good game, but at that price, if you have a modded or pseudo Saturn, I would recommend you try before you buy with this one. Gameplay wise, there's a great variety in the types of levels, but I would say that because it's on the rails, there's not a great variety in how you can play the levels because you are led along the level. Aiming your bullets at other ships and moving your ship out of the way of enemy fire can be a bit hit and miss. And there isn't a great deal of weapons to choose from, but if you like difficult games and you enjoy a challenge, this one could be for you. A cheaper alternative to GVAC is the excellent Titan Wars, as it was known in Japan and Europe, or Solar Eclipse as it was called in America. This is also a 3D plane shooting game, but you have more movement over your path. You can only go forward still, but you can move the plane in the screen left to right, and you can choose from first person in the cockpit view or third person with the plane in front of the screen view. The graphics are good and there is a great variation in the levels, including bonus levels to find in the game. It was released in 1995 and 1996 and made by Crystal Dynamics. The European version is around £30, while the American version is around $15. You can also get the cheap Japanese version for £10, but you will miss out on the great FMV cutscenes. I would highly recommend this game, and I think it's an excellent price and it's a brilliant game, so go out and try it.
Hellcat, get clear! Confirmed!
Baker, what's your ETA?
7 minutes at full burn.
Don't confuse the instrument of God with the hand of God.
There he is again. If I had just one tracking missile.
And don't confuse
Shining Force 3 Part 1 is an RPG that was made by Camelot Software and released in 1997 in Japan and 1998 in Europe and America. It was the first part of a 3-part series, but only Part 1 was released in America and Europe, whereas Japan got all 3. However, you can play Part 2 and 3 in English due to fan translations. This game is absolutely brilliant. and despite costing around £150 these days, I would still say it's definitely worth it if you can afford it. The story is great, the graphics and battle system are excellent, and I would also recommend getting part 2 and 3, the fan translations in English, as reproductions to own the full set. I don't usually like reproductions, but in this case I'd say it's definitely worth it to play the full game and the full story. On the cheap side, we have the very underrated Mysteria. Mysteria is a Sega Saturn RPG which only costs around £25 in Europe. This is a steal because outside of Japan we didn't get many RPGs for the Sega Saturn, and it's a really good game. Okay, the graphics do look a little bit rough around the edges, but the battle system is similar to Shining Force 3. And the gameplay and story are what count for an RPG, and they're both excellent. Unfortunately, the sequel was a Japan exclusive. And the game is made by Micro Cabin and was released in 1995 and 1996. It also has different names in all regions. It's called Mysteria in Europe, Ridlord Saga in Japan, and both Mysteria and then Blazing Heroes in America, due to copyright issues. It's a mystery to me why this game's still so cheap, and it's often overlooked by people. Maybe it is the graphics, but I think it's an absolutely brilliant game, and I'd highly recommend you add it to your collection. Next up is the very rare and expensive Shin Ray Juice Sushi Taramaru, which costs around £550 on eBay and is a mouthful to say. However, the game is excellent 2.5D side-scrolling action game with amazing graphics and great gameplay. The game has multiple characters to choose from and can be played in 1 or 2 player. Fighting mechanic is very unique, but you get the hang of it very quickly. So I suppose the big question is it worth the £550? Well, that depends on how much money you have to spend, I suppose. Me personally, I'd never spend £550 on one game. This game has skyrocketed in price in the last 5 to 10 years, and for this price I'd definitely try it with a pseudo Saturn before dropping the big money on it. But it is a really good game and I do recommend you try it out. And it's a great showcase of what the Saturn hardware could do. On the cheap side, we have another game which was known as a different name in each of the regions, with it being called Shinobi X in Europe, Shinobi Legions in America, and Shin Shinobi Den in Japan. This is also a 2D side-scrolling action game. It's not just the name that varies by region, so does the price. The Japanese version can be got for a very reasonable £30, while the European PAL version is around £80. This is a good game with legendary cutscenes. Some people love them and some people despise them. I really like them. The European version is known to be the best version, as this has a different improved game musical score compared to the other two versions. Although I own the Japanese version because it's better value for money, I know some fans didn't like this version of Shinobi, but I think it's a good game and I definitely recommend you try it out for the price. Next up is one of the Sega Saturn's most famous games, Radiant Silvergun. It was made by Treasure and released as a Japanese exclusive in 1998. It is a shoot 'em up and was exclusive to the Sega Saturn at the time. It can now be got on the Xbox Online store. It can be played in 1 or 2 player, and is famous for being one of the Sega Saturn's best games and its high price, although the price hasn't been rising as much as some other games have more recently, and it can be got for around £150. And in all honesty, it could be worth that if you're a big Sega Saturn fan or a shoot 'em up fan, although the Xbox Online version is only $9.99. The graphics and gameplay and weapons are all excellent. Which version you get's up to you, but it's definitely a must play game. It's absolutely brilliant. The game is a technical marvel for the Sega Saturn and still looks stunning even to today, with big bosses and lots going on screen. This game might be expensive, but it's definitely one of the Sega Saturn's best games. On the cheap side, but definitely as good in my opinion, is Keuka Anti. This is also a shoot 'em up which can be played in 1 or 2 player and was made by Raising and released as a Japanese exclusive in 1997. The game was due to come to the West on the Saturn under the name Terra Diver, but sadly didn't end up making it over to these shores. It also appeared on the PlayStation, but the Saturn version is generally accepted as the best version with no slowdown. The game can be gotten for around £45 buy it now on eBay, but recent auctions I have seen, the game has gone for around £35, which is an absolute bargain for one of the best shooters on the Sega Saturn. In fact, I'd go as far as to say this is my favourite shooter on the Sega Saturn, and it's one of my best games for the Sega Saturn. I can't recommend it higher enough. The graphics and gameplay are brilliant, there's a choice of ships and a big variety of weapons. The game also runs very smooth and fast, is an absolute must for anyone's collection. Going back to the expensive side, and one of the Sega Saturn's best games in my opinion is Street Fighter 03, made by Capcom. It is an absolutely amazing arcade conversion to the Sega Saturn. It uses the 4MB RAM cartridge to give a version of the game that absolutely blew the PlayStation version out the water. With great graphics and excellent Street Fighter gameplay, this is truly a masterpiece for the Sega Saturn. The game didn't release until 1999, but it now costs around £200 buy it now. However, it does go cheaper when it's at auction. Is the game worth it? Well, it depends. If you can get it for more 100 and 150 range, I'd say. If you can get it for that price, I'd say go for it, because it has an absolutely amazing game. Or it is also available cheaper on the Dreamcast. This game, however, took the Sega Saturn to places nobody thought possible. It's absolutely amazing. On the cheaper side kind of is Street Fighter Collection. Well, it's still Street Fighter and contains Street Fighter 02-, Super Street Fighter 2X and Super Street Fighter 2. It was released by Capcom in 1997 and 1998, so why did they say it's cheap kind of? Well, the Japanese version of the game is a very reasonable £30, which is an absolute bargain, but the European version is around £200. So I would definitely recommend getting the Japanese version, as there's no language barrier, it's Street Fighter, you know the story and how to play it. There is a great variety of games on this collection, but I mainly play 02-, which plays absolutely brilliantly, and for the price of the Japanese version, this is a must-have for anyone's collection. You've been listening to Retro Dad and Modern Lad, the YouTube channel and soon to be website. If you've liked this video, give it a like. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. We've got loads of videos mainly on Sega, Saturn and Dreamcast, but also other retro modern computers. Thanks for listening and I'll see you soon. Bye.